Hey everybody, this is my figure 8 puffer Butterbean, and this is my 40-gallon Brackish tank, although at the moment it is no longer technically Brackish. I've been slowly lowering the specific gravity over the past several months. Every time I do a water change, I've been putting fresh water back in, so now we are definitely below the threshold of Brackish water. But we're just below the threshold. We're at a specific gravity of like 1.003, maybe 1.002. So we're a little bit below it, but I still call it my Brackish tank because this has been my Brackish tank for years and years. So again, that's more of a name of this tank than a description. At any rate, Butterbean's getting a bath today. It is water change day. It is long overdue in this tank. I honestly don't even remember the last time I did a water change on this tank. So I will be checking the specific gravity both before and after the water change so we can kind of figure out what's going on with that. I will be checking the nitrates so we can see what's going on with that. And of course I'm also going to get in there with my non-gravel vac siphon hose. It's just an open vinyl tube, and it has a great deal of suction at the end, and if I'm careful I can suck all of those dead snail shells out of there without sucking too much of the substrate. I will suck some of the substrate out of there, but I always just sterilize that and put it back in the tank a couple days from now. You'll also notice the patches of reddish material growing on the substrate, and if we look in the back, it's actually quite a bit of it growing on the plants and even on some of the plumbing and hardware in the tank. I'll probably try to get some of that vacked out of there at the same time. So we're probably going to need to do more than one 5-gallon bucket to get this taken care of. But however you slice it, we're going to go ahead and do it with the tripod set up so we can... I got distracted there for a minute. I saw a frond from the Java fern moving, and I thought I had one last little bumblebee goby in there. I'm pretty sure Butterbean here is the only fish that's left in this tank. I haven't seen another one of those bumblebee gobies in quite a long time, and I know my final orange sailfin molly died a while ago. So if there is a bumblebee goby still left in this tank, or a shrimp or something, it's doing a fantastic job of hiding. As far as I know, Butterbean is the only fish left in this tank. So anyway, there's a look at what it looks like now. Let me get the tripod set up, and we will get in there and start doing our best to get this tank cleaned up today. Alright everybody, we are going to start with my melamine sponge here. I've said many times in the past, these are also sold under the name Magic Eraser. If you buy these under the name Magic Erasers, they work just the same. This is simply the generic version of it. Again, it's called a melamine sponge. I'll put a link down below. I get them on Amazon in a 48 pack, and then I cut each one of those into either 8 or 10 pieces. So I get quite a lot of these little sponges for the money. I'm trying not to disturb Butterbean too much. He's down here on the right hand side, kind of underneath where I'm trying to wipe. I guess let me switch ends. We'll come down, start at this end. After all these years, his behavior is still kind of strange, sort of unpredictable. Sometimes he doesn't seem to be scared of me at all. Almost comes curious up to where I'm working to see what I'm doing. And then other times he just freaks out when I put my hand in the tank and splashes at the surface. I've heard stories of the... See, now he's starting to thrash around a little bit. He'll do that. He'll sort of go up and down on the glass. And I'm almost not sure if it's more of like him just having a hissy fit than it is him actually being scared of me being in there. I think it's more of him just basically telling me to get off of his lawn. This is his tank, not mine. And get your hand out of it, sort of thing. I'm not sure. Anyway, as long as he doesn't get too violent, I don't want him to thrash about and hurt himself. And of course, I don't want him to come flipping up and flying out of the tank. And I will say, in all the years I've had him, I've never seen him puffed up. I did see him one time, very briefly. I think he had been puffed up and was just in the process of unpuffing because he looked a little bit big and swollen as I was walking past, and like unusually big and swollen, like even bigger than he would have if he had just eaten a lot of food. And I kind of did a double take, and when I stepped back, I saw him, you know, he was a lot smaller than that, but he was still bigger than usual, but he sort of shrank before my eyes into his normal size. And so I think I just missed him being puffed up, because they will do that occasionally just to sort of stretch out their muscles and basically to have a good stretch. They will puff themselves up for no other reason occasionally. But I've yet to ever see him do that. So, alright, that is good enough for getting the glass wiped down. And if I missed any spots, I can always come back and do it later. I just wanted to do that so we could see what was going on when I get in there and gravel vac. So give me another minute. Put you on pause here. Alright, now, as I said, that's both ends of this tubing. So there's no wide gap at one end like you would get on a typical gravel vac. This is just a open vinyl hose. Where I got a clog. Got to be really careful when you do this. Again, it's not a big deal if you suck up some of the substrate, but if you suck up too much at once, it will definitely get clogged up in this hose. I'm going to try to do this without spilling everything everywhere like I usually do. The only problem with this also is that it sucks water out of the tank so fast. You're on a really, really tight time schedule once you get this thing flowing. You don't have a lot of time to make adjustments and mess around, or your bucket will be full before you get ready to really get in there and start doing anything. Yep, we're going to go ahead and get rid of that piece of Java. I can always get it back out of the bucket. And some of these really big snail shells, I got to be careful with them too and make sure I get them out of there one at a time, or else I will have problems with them. That was a bunch of cyanobacteria I pulled out there. That was a bunch of cyanobacteria. I don't know if I'm going to do a chemi-clean treatment on this tank or not. So that is one 5-gallon bucket. We could dump that, and then we will get in there again, and we'll try to get some of that other stuff out of there, some of the cyanobacteria out of there. Alright, now for the cyanobacteria, we're going to use a regular old gravel vac, because a lot of what we're going to be pulling out of there is on plants, and I don't want to destroy the plants in the process of doing this. Actually not as much in there as I thought. A lot of that is just the dead ends of some of the Java. So there's a big old chunk of green slime you saw going up there. And then there's a little bit of red slime in there too. I've said this before, I don't know why, but the red slime seems to do better, or the red cyanobacteria, whatever you want to call it, seems to do better in higher salinity. And since I've been gradually bringing the salinity down in this tank, we've been seeing less and less of the red and more of the green slime. So some of the tips of the fern could be dying because of the cyanobacteria. It's not necessarily toxic to the plants or anything, but it will cover the plants and block a lot of the light from getting to them. Just like certain kinds of algae will do that. And that in its own right is enough to damage the periphery of the plants, the tips of the plants. There's a big old clump of it right there. That's actually roots and a baby Java plant. That was not, as I thought, a big clump of cyanobacteria. Alright, well, I just broke my siphon. And there's not a whole lot of stuff in there to worry about anyway, so we're going to go ahead and call that good for the draining part. Let me check the nitrates, see what we're dealing with here before we refill the tank, and then we will go ahead and check the specific gravity on all that stuff. So sit tight, and we will see you for the final recap after I fill it back up. Alright everybody, I have been waiting for the last several minutes for Butterbean to settle down a little bit. He's always agitated after a water change. And while I've been watching him and looking in there, this is the first time I've actually had a chance to look in from this angle with the top of the tank covered, the way I keep the tops of my tanks covered. With the front open, at the angle I was looking in, I was not able to actually see that back glass, and I did not even realize there's big horking sheets of the cyanobacteria just loosely clinging to the glass. So I'm going to take advantage of that looking like that while I've got the bucket right here, and when I'm finished this video I will get in there with that hose again, and I'll get in at an angle where I can see what I'm doing, and I'll just pull a bunch of that stuff off the back glass. So I will be doing that after this video is over. If you notice all that swirling around right there, I just now am noticing that myself. Otherwise, not a lot to talk about. I would like to point out that the nitrates in this tank were very elevated. I know that's not going to give you the best view looking through it into a tank, but it's really red. It's as red as it looks. So I'd put that over 80, maybe 80 to 100 parts per million. It's definitely over 60. You know, again, definitely time to do a water change. It's been a while. But nitrates don't really bother most fish unless they get really, really high into the hundreds of parts per millions, at least in a short, you know, the short term. Elevated nitrates aren't really going to be that big of a deal. And especially when you've got a fish like the puffer fish that is euryhaline and can swim around through varying degrees of salinity. So having the dissolved solids, all those nitrates in the water, having that number go up and down and whatever is not really that big of a deal for puffers. So I'm not too worried about it, not concerned, but it does give you an idea of how long it's been since I've done a water change in this tank. Keep in mind also that even though he is one single fish in this 40-gallon tank, he is a pretty stocky, chunky little fish, and he's a very, very messy eater. He eats either freeze-dried krill, which is his staple food. He gets that about 5 nights a week, and then a couple of nights a week I throw a handful of live snails in there and let him eat the snails. And, of course, he goes around and he chews on the shells whenever he feels like he needs to wear his teeth down a little bit. You can see all those little tiny bits and pieces of shells. That's partially from when he eats the snails initially, but he does go back around and pick up the shells and simply chews on them, and that is because puffers' teeth continually grow in the same way a rodent's teeth will continually grow, and it will actually cause them problems if they don't wear their teeth down. So it's not that puffers like to eat shelled animals like snails and shrimp. They really need to. Now, if I'm not mistaken, the figure 8 puffer has fairly soft teeth as far as the world of puffers go, and they don't need a ton of really hard food. So as long as you're feeding them snails once in a while and they're getting a regular diet of the krill, you know, even the krill shell, as soft as that may seem, it still will wear their teeth down significantly. So they don't have to have a ton of really hard material like some puffers do, like clamshells, for example. You know, some puffers need to chew on clamshells and things of that nature to keep their teeth under control, whereas these figure 8s do not. So anyway, that's all I can think of to talk about. I showed you the nitrates already. We looked at the cyanobacteria sheets on the back glass. Talked about Butterbean being a little agitated. And specific gravity. We started at 1.003 and we are now at 1.001. So we're barely, we're not even close to brackish water at this point. We're probably well below the taste threshold. I think the way the tank was before was below the taste threshold. I did not actually taste this water, but I would imagine if I did, I would not detect any salt in it at all. So we'll see how that affects Butterbean. We'll see how that affects the cyanobacteria return, and we will see how it affects the plants. I know it's going to do good for the plants, and you can even see some big sheets of cyanobacteria that I did not get out. So I'll try to get that when I get in there to get that stuff off the black glass. I'll use that open-ended siphon hose again, and I'll try to get that picked up too. So there you go. There's a before and after look at my 40-gallon brackish tank. Hope you enjoyed. Make sure you're subscribed, and I will see you real soon in the next one. Thanks again.